Welcome to everyone to this Patent Literacy Symposium and this session titled Introduction to See the Sound Visual Phonics. My name is Kirsten DeRoche, and I'm joined by my colleague Karen Deary, and we're excited to facilitate this session for everyone. Before we start, we have a few housekeeping items to review. You can access the presenter handouts for this session, the presenter bio, and the conference schedule on the Patent website with the link that Karen has been providing in the chat. Just as a reminder, this session will be recorded and is 75 minutes in length, which will include around a 15-minute question and answer period at the end. To access closed captioning, please click on the icon CC Live Transcript on the Zoom control panel. If you experience any technical difficulties, please go to the Technical Support Guides area above the schedule on the Symposium webpage. Because this is a webinar, microphones have been muted and your video feature has been turned off. We would love for you to tweet out or share on any social media all that you're learning about from the Literacy Symposium. Please use the hashtag PatentLit2022. And now we would like to welcome our friend and colleague, Sue Ann Hauser. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be able to bring a little taste of visual phonics to this group. So as with all of our patent events, most of you have probably been to them. We always share our mission, and that is to support the efforts and initiatives of the Bureau of Special Education to build capacity at the local level, and that we always encourage teams to consider the general education setting before they consider a more restrictive environment. All right, so today, or this session, we're going to talk about visual phonics, the rationale, how it became into being, its origins. And as with evidence-based practices, I'm going to share some evidence that it works through research around that, and talk about activities that people can use in their instruction, that model, that integration in the classroom. And just know that this is not a visual phonics qualified training, in that you will have a great understanding of it. And I'm introducing you to a few of the sounds and the gestures that go with them, but you must take the full training, which is 8 hours, in order to be considered a teacher that can use it in their instruction, an SLP that can use it in your work. So I just wanted to put that out there up front. And also know that some of the slides you don't have because of copyright issues. So the PDF I sent for posting is missing a few of the slides, but that's because we're not allowed to put them out there in the world unless you are come to a visual phonics training. So, and as your questions come up for you, please put them in the chat. My wonderful colleagues who are facilitating will be addressing these along the way, and they'll give me a holler to say, hey, we got some questions. Okay, so a little bit about me. What brings me to be the one that can do this in front of all of you? As the intro slide said, I am a licensed visual phonics trainer, which is a bit of an arduous process, but it is certainly attainable. So I maintain that license. I cannot be recorded during a formal visual phonics training. I will lose my license, which is also why some of the slides were not in the PDF. So know that they hold this very near and dear and close as they should. I am a teacher of the deaf, of students who are deaf or hard of hearing. I am a Pennsylvania letters trainer, language of essential, LETRS, language of essential, what's the T?
Teachers.
Oh my goodness, of reading and spelling. Hey, there we go. Words, you all know that. Sometimes they just aren't there. So I was trained in the first cohort in Pennsylvania. So that really changed me as a teacher, understanding in-depth literacy and what it truly takes to become a fluent reader. I'm also a sign language interpreter that I can work in the schools, and I work out of the Patton Harrisburg office. But I have been teaching visual phonics for more than 10 years as a licensed trainer, and I implemented it with my instruction. So that's what brings me to you all. So now I want to know who you are. So a poll is going to pop up, and I'm going to ask you to let us know who you are. And if your role is not listed, please put it in the chat, and my colleagues will share that with all of us. So I'll give you a moment to respond. And when it says family member, that means your role in attending today is because you are want to use this with your child, with the child in your life. So that's where that's who the family members are when we're asking that.
So Sue Ann, I don't know if you can see the chat, but we're getting some people who clicked on other dyslexia interventionists. Amy, who's with us, is a college lecturer.
Great.
Facilitating teacher for an independent study homeschool model. Some more reading specialist, dyslexia interventionists.
Okay, great. Thank you. So do you want to share the poll results so that everybody gets to see them?
Sure. And there we go.
So general ed teachers, you win as far as you're the most numerous in our audience. Special ed, a couple of family members, fantastic. SLPs, reading folks, you're tied with general ed teachers, and some paraprofessionals. Good, good. And we have a couple administrators. Well, that is really helpful to me as a presenter to show, help me guide in some of the examples and language I will use with you this afternoon. So along with me, I have a team of colleagues who are also adept at visual phonics. One is also a licensed trainer, that's Erin Campion. She is in the role of being the statewide family coordinator for deaf, hard of hearing. So she is a parent of 4 children, 2 who are deaf. And she's also an educator and teacher by trade. So she is part of our Patton team, and she is my fellow trainer. And then my 2 colleagues, Jennifer Craig and Tara Kelly, who are out of our Pittsburgh and East office, the West and East office, they are in the process of becoming licensed trainers, so that we will have a full complement in our initiative, which is specific to deaf, hard of hearing, but we can train anyone in visual phonics. All right, so think about, how did many teachers introduce written vocabulary? So I'm not going to ask you to put it in the chat, but just think about some of the ways. And, you know, I am someone who might resemble that because I started teaching back in the 80s. So we labeled everything in our classroom, trying to attach that print to the concept or have it in context, right? And some of that is still going on, which is great. I had my students name the words and write them 5 to 10 times as homework. And that the intent there was around short-term visual memory and motor memory as they were writing. And then also looking up those definitions, which again was a short-term memory piece for memorization. So that we've seen a lot of that in classrooms, and maybe we don't practice it so much anymore. I hope not anyway. So let's just assume you all, I just introduced you to the next words that are coming up, and it is your job to read them to yourself and then write them out on a piece of paper. So you just need a scratch piece of paper, the margin of something, anything. So, and I'm sure you have that ready if you're taking notes. And if you're typing your notes, just type it into whatever you're doing. So I'm going to give you about, I don't know, 15, 20 seconds, because it's not many words on this page. So here you go. and you need to write it in English print. I wish I could see your faces right now. And if you know visual phonics, don't cheat and put the answer in the chat. Don't. Okay, so I expect some of you may have gotten lucky with some guesses. I don't know. So in the chat, would you just type in what strategies did you use to decode each one of those words? And now some of you are going, oh, there was more than one word, right? That doesn't often compute, but, and I'm gonna peek at my chat. So, I appreciate honesty. Some people said, nope, I couldn't decode it. What letters, these look like? Are they pictures? Are they letters? Who knows? I just saw some scribbles. I just wrote what I saw, so you literally copied what you saw. That's a strategy used by many of our students, right? So reverse the letters maybe. And some of you just started guessing associated sounds with similar-ish letters. All right, thank you for sharing that. And so with that said, what if it helped you to write each one of those 10 times? I don't think so, right? And how about, some of you shared, those feelings you experienced while attempting, failure, frustration, shut down, right? So with that said, this is as close as we could get you to be a struggling reader, because all of us have cracked the code of English print, right? So this is what we can offer you to say, oh my gosh, this is really hard. Imagine if this was everything you came to. Every time you sat down to do work, or the teacher's going to call on you next, and that's the space, emotional space you're in. Can you imagine? I would produce some acting out behaviors to get me out of class, maybe, or even self-injurious, because it just is it's so much work, because you don't have the skills to decode that text. I do. I could read that in a heartbeat, but you haven't developed that yet. So that's kind of where we want you to start with this, understanding the frustrations and what visual phonics can do to help students crack the code. So just to make sure we're all on the same page, because I'm going to be throwing around some definitions, and most of you know this already, so it'll validate, but maybe some of you don't. Want to make sure you know what a phoneme is. That is a speech sound that combines with others in a language system to make words. So it's that individual smallest sound. Now, phonological awareness. That is being able to hear the difference between sounds and spoken words. You know, your kid's sitting in the back seat and you're asking them, how many sounds do you hear in the word mop? And they're able to say mop. That is phonological awareness, that they can hear those three sounds. Now, phonemic awareness. This gets a little tricky for some folks because they're not interchangeable. That's being able to pull those apart and put them back together. Some kids can hear those individual sounds and have a terrible time putting them back together in a word. So I worked with a little guy who, with the mop, he went mop. He could not just say mop. He was constantly segmenting the initial sound with the rest of the word. But that phonological awareness means you can pull them apart and put them back together. And then a grapheme is exactly what you might suspect. It involves writing. So it's a letter or letter combinations that spell a phoneme. How do you spell the sound ch, as in chat? Okay, it's 2 letters. So the grapheme is ch in chat. That would spell that sound in that word, because there's other ways to spell ch, but we're not going to address that all today. And then finally, phonics. That's where we put it together. That is the methodology of teaching the sound symbol relationship, sound letter relationship. Okay, so see the sound visual phonics. What is it? So it is a system of 51 plus gestures that look and feel like the sounds they represent. So that little guy you see there with his claw up, he is Topher the gopher, according to the visual phonics people. They have updated some of the drawings, and I like him better. And I also like that he's got little glasses and a hearing aid on, because this was originally developed for students who are deaf or hard of hearing. So the written symbol is part of it, and it resembles the hand gesture. So, and we're going to look at that closer, but know that not all students need you to be using the written symbol. Again, we'll be talking about that some more. You don't just go through and teach it all. That's not how it works. And it's to be implemented by those who have been trained by a licensed trainer. So that is important. Some folks come to a training and they say, oh, I can go back and share this with my staff. That isn't how it works. And once you really go through the training, you'll say, I get why that's a thing. It's multi-sensory, and it's supporting that phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, phonics, all those pieces. It supports that. And it has the gesture and a written symbol that depicts each of the speech sounds of English. So that's where we get that 51-ish number. So when you're doing the gesture, it emulates what your articulators are doing, which includes your lips, your teeth, your tongue, your breath. That's all part of it. And then it facilitates that multi-sensory connection with alphabet letters and their corresponding sounds. So it provides that phoneme grapheme mapping, as we know is so important. Here's what it is not. Here's what it is not. It is not a reading program. It is a tool to be overlaid on top of whatever instruction you're doing. So you don't need to go get new materials to implement visual phonics. You're going to overlay it over top of the program you're using already to teach phonics, to teach literacy and reading and writing. It's not a communication system. It's not sign language. It just isn't. It is gestures that are used to represent phonemes, and when the kids have mastered it, you drop it. You don't drop language. So it is not a language. It is not supplanting American Sign Language or anything else that we have gone on with our students. And it's not a speech program, but can it be beneficial to use in speech and for our SLPs who are here? Absolutely, absolutely. And it's used, it is not used, sorry, it's not designed to be used only with students who are deaf or hard of hearing. It is shown to be effective across the board with any struggling reader. And finally, it is not to be plugged into one program. And I know we're redundant here, but it is astounding how many times people come back and, oh, I can't use it with this program we're using because it's not something that Sue Ann mentioned at the training. No, it can be used with programs that are teaching early literacy skills or struggling readers. All right, where did it come from? So students have been using this, believe it or not, since 1987, formally. A parent of a child, of 9 children, 2 who were deaf, decided I need to figure out what I can do to support my students who are falling way behind their peers and their siblings at that developmental age. So she came up with this series of gestures and symbols to support that. And that's where it came from. A parent developed it. And then they hooked up with a university in Wisconsin, and they took it under their wing and made it into what visual phonics is today. It is governed by what's called ICLI, the International Communication Learning Institute, and it is a nonprofit organization. So it really only started being used widely in 1987, but as early as 1982 is where it started to be getting formalized. And then there's the website, seethesound.org. Excuse me. So what setting can it be used in? It would be much easier to name where it couldn't be used. And I actually don't know of any. So all of these settings, general ed, special ed, deaf, hard of hearing classroom, auditory training, when with speech, with English learners, adult literacy. This is used by speech folks working with adult patients who had a stroke to help their speech develop back where it is, and parents and families. It can be used across the board. So with that said, we don't want to forget our families. So, you know, thinking about what is the benefit of engaging families with visual phonics? Yeah, to reinforce it at home, right? And if you can think of all the ways you already include families in supports and reinforcing instruction, what's happening in the classroom, this can be used that way as well. But you would only give them what they need. You're not going to dump visual phonics on them all at once. What does that child need? Because guess what? This child might be using it for other sounds, and then this child is using it for other sounds. So it's very prescriptive for easily prescriptive for students as individuals. Now, before I really go on, are there any questions so far from and I can see your faces.
Funny you should ask. One just came in as you were starting to ask, would this be beneficial for nonverbal autism students?
That is a great question. I am going to say yes. Here, you know, it's not the magic bullet. And as with any intervention, if it doesn't work over time, then don't use it. So we have, in fact, Kirsten here, she used it with a student who had, you want to tell them about your student?
Yeah, I was working with a student who has CP, and he was very young, starting out in kindergarten, but he also used an AAC device too, with an eye gaze. And so we used approximations of some of the gestures from VP to help support some phonological awareness and phoneme specifically awareness with him.
And he had typical hearing, correct?
He did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we've also seen it being used with a little bit older student. Several years ago, we had what's called Project Max. Some of you may have been part of that. That was a statewide initiative working with the students who are the neediest, the multiple disabilities, if you will. And, you know, there this young lady sat, she was maybe 11 or 12 with an iPad. The teacher had recorded herself doing the gestures and making the sounds on an iPad. And she was able to identify different sounds when it brought back to her. She couldn't make the gesture per se because of control, and Kirsten alluded to that. It might be modified, but if they're consistent and getting it correct and accurate, that's all we want. If they can't do the gesture for the P sound, and they're able to bring their hand up towards their face, they're identifying the letter in print, and they can identify it when it's hooked to other letters. That is wonderful. It's doing it's being effective. So when doing this, you know, voice is a choice, but mouth is a must. That's going to come up a couple times this afternoon, and want to make sure that kind of sticks with you. So you want to make sure they're making the proper linkages. For example, the sound shh versus ooh. If I turn my voice off and you look at my video, there's a difference, but it can be subtle. But that is so important that they are making the accurate mouth movement to go with it. And if they can't use their voice, but can still make the movement here, again, we're going to take it because it really helps linking and build those new neural pathways. I put a little link on there to Sounds of Speech out of Iowa. If you haven't visited that website, oh my goodness, please go do. Visit that, Sounds of Speech, Iowa, and it'll come up. It is phenomenal, addressing the movements, the sounds, and it has nothing to do with deafness, but it is a fantastic support for literacy development for teachers in your instruction and speech folks and families. Just consider everybody part of it. All right, so I want to show you a video of it in action. Now, I will say that this is we have all the kids we have in video are deaf or hard of hearing because we can't get folks to share video with us. It's been painful. My mission this coming school year is to convince folks to let us to come in and see them in action. So what you're going to see is they're working on connecting sounds to letters, and all these students are deaf or hard of hearing. And if they can do it, guess what? We can expect our students who have access to sound to do it. Here we go. I hope.
Which letter? G, G, G. Which? You're right. What is that? A G. Sounds like what? Sounds like what? G, G. Good girl. Thank you. You can have a seat. Who's ready? Who knows? Which sounds like? Tough one. Laura, what letter sounds like? What letter, Laura? C. Is she right? C? What letter? What letter? K. Two? Two letters? You are right. I've heard both. You are right. Take it out. C, K, both sides.
So what did you see that young lady being able to do? She was able to take that sound, which is so hard. It's an unvoiced, or, you know, if you feel your throat, it's not making any rumbling, right? Your motor isn't running. And it can be spelled several ways. And a hard C is k, and the K is a k. So really helps students begin to crack that code. So, all right, so here's a couple for all of us to try together. So the gesture and the font or the symbol are going to suggest the way this sound is made. And before we do this, remember, voice is a choice, but mouth is a must. You got to move your mouth when you're doing this. So if you look at the first one, this is a hard G, or the G sound. And when we make that, do you see it looks like a little U on the side? That represents your thumb and your index finger, so your pincher hand. And where is it produced? G, 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 back here. So when we use this, it would be G. Which way is better? This way. G. So it's just opening as far as that symbol is there, the font. It's not ga, G. All right, then next to it is the T sound. T, T. That's an unvoiced and very hard to see. T, T. But if you look at the print there, the font, it represents your index finger coming off your thumb. So this is what my hand, it looks like I'm going to flick, okay? And it's T, and it's happening up here. So I'm going to hold my hand closer to the front of my mouth. T, as your tongue explodes off the teeth. T. Yeah. So, and now if I can do it without my voice, or T with my voice. But as long as you're moving your mouth, which this one is hard to see. All right. So we're going to do just a couple more here to get your feet wet. So this sound is S. And what you're going to do, now before you do it, you're going to draw that symbol So it looks like an S on its side, right? And you move down and away from your mouth as you're drawing that. And just watch for a minute. You see the back of my hand? It's going to come down like it's coming down that initial drop. I'm at the top of the hill and back down. So you're getting a pivot action with your wrist. And think of all that kinesthetic information that is being sent to the brain. And the air is coming out. So we're coming front just a little bit. And how about its partner? So that is the soft S or unvoiced sound, but Z, which can be captured by the letter Z or by an S, like in the word rose, and often with possessive. That is Karen's book, Z, but it can be spelled with an S. So these are the sounds, and then attaching it to print as we are in our instruction. So for this one, it's kind of fun. It's just a zigzag, and you come up, back a little bit, and then out. So it's Z, Z, Z. And boy, big difference between S and Z if you feel your throat. Yeah, a couple examples there for you. So when we are thinking about language development with our students, and this is as it is attached to literacy, I'm going to start with the biggest chunk that students can hold on to. Often kids are really able to hook onto a whole word. And that's that smallest spoken unit of language that has meaning in isolation. So prefixes, affixes, they don't, or in general, they don't have meaning in isolation. Okay, so we know that means not, right? But it doesn't have meaning in itself. So it has to have meaning within itself to be a word, so a whole word. Mop is a whole word, right, with meaning. And then that syllable, any of you done Project Read? A syllable is a word or part of a word with one talking vowel. So yeah, it's that part of a word that has a talking vowel. Onset rhyme. This isn't as commonly known and used by folks. Those of you who are in the realm of being literacy and reading coaches and supports there, you certainly will probably know onset rhyme, but that is the initial phonological unit of any word. And then the rhyme is the string of letters that follow. And that phonological unit might be a blend. So blue, the onset would be bl, and the rhyme would be the rest of it, ooh. So I think you get that idea. And then finally, we already know what that individual phoneme is. And we're looking at this from the most difficult up to the easiest. Whole words are easier for kids because it's a big chunk to hold on to. And often they've memorized the word. It's not that they can break it down into sounds. They've often memorized that shape of what that word is, and they haven't really cracked the code. Our students with dyslexia can fool people often for a while, right? That they are cracking the code when they're not. Their oral language might be great, but not when it comes to the printed language. And then as we move on up through word, syllable, onset, rhyme, and then phoneme is that tiniest piece of our language as a speech sound. And so getting students sometimes to break that down is really a challenge because that is so hard. Or they get to the end of a word and they sounded it out. By the time they get to the end, they have no clue what it was. And half the time we don't either because it was so painstakingly done through finding those individual phonemes. So I have a chunk of research for you, and I don't want to, we're not going to get into it too deeply, but wanted to make sure that you see the evidence we have. So the gentleman whose name is on this summary, Dave Krupke, his last name is there, he is the curator of the research in visual phonics, and he took that body of research, which is voluminous now, and gave a summary for us. And he is a licensed visual phonics trainer and a professor in a speech program at Ambrose University in Iowa. And so we find that statistically, there is a significant improvement in students who are deaf or hard of hearing in their reading skills. And I should say, and paired with systematic, in other words, scientifically validated systematic instruction. And then pre-K and K students, they are getting their knowledge of letters and sounds earlier, and that is all kids, not students who are deaf or hard of hearing. And this has helped to abate that summer drop-off and the recoupment time at the beginning of the school year, which is excruciating, because not all kids have lost as much as some of the struggling learners, right? So then how do we get kids caught up? They have seen a drop in that summer slump fall off. Kindergarten students are writing earlier. There's less referrals for Title I, reading recovery piece in kindergarten. There is an increased rate of sight word recognition and retention for kindergarten and first grade. Increase in DIBEL scores. Yeah, we have been, I know several programs that are letting kids use the gestures when they are doing this is aside from just the increased scores, but even students who maybe their articulation, they can't give you the sounds that you want them to, but they can give you the gesture that matches the sound that's in print. So it has really helped with that piece. And first grade decoding scores are coming up. It can be used with older students, and we'll take a look at that. And I have this in here, but we're not going to go into it. It's here for your reference in your presentation. Gestures and learning, there's lots of research to support that. And there's a little summary of it, that it does work great, and it helps with recall and so forth when it comes to literacy.
Sue Ann, from the last slide, can you give the name of the curator again?
Oh, we'll be revisiting him again, but his name is David Krupke, Krupke. And his website is on your slide that has some of the resources. So you'll see his website here in a little bit. So again, I don't want to bore you, but just so you know, we have some support for the concept of this multisensory piece. Louisa Moats, who is presenting at this conference. I think her presentation was earlier today. And according to Louisa, who is also the creator and author of Letters, that primary process that drive reading is affected by our mastery of letter combinations, letter sequencing, words, punctuation marks, and so forth, and the linguistic units in our language. And decoding and encoding involve mapping sound to print, and that's what we're doing with visual phonics. So a little bit more from her. I'm going to just let you read each one of these statements. And it's in line with everything that we've talked about so far. So that last one, students who cannot read words well usually demonstrate weakness in the phonological processing. And again, this works fantastic for students who have a weakness in there. Some of you may have read Mark Seidenberg's, he has quite a bit of work out there. And it is very supportive of using something like visual phonics. That the common thread is that performance is impaired because of the phonological deficit. So again, here's the research specific to visual phonics. All that, the previous couple slides was just about literacy instruction and what portion is important for creating fluent readers. And now we are looking at specific effectiveness of visual phonics on general literacy, not for students who are deaf or hard of hearing. So it indicates that at-risk kindergartners, where that letter sound relationship is, visual phonics helps them maintain that when it is used in instruction. Older elementary students also benefit from using visual phonics in their instruction. And we know that magic window of second grade closing on those early literacy skills that some of the kids get through or by, I will say, or just haven't developed it by that time, and it can be used with older students. So just two here on students who are deaf or hard of hearing. And Beverly Trezick, who was on the last couple of pieces of research as well. This is from her and her colleagues. And, she says 1 year of instruction from a phonics-based reading program or curriculum supplemented by visual phonics, kindergartners and first grade students who are deaf or hard of hearing can demonstrate improvements with beginning literacy skills as measured by, and here it is, standardized assessments. So they're using standardized assessments to assess the students' capabilities, and they're seeing results of improved skill. And it did not matter how significant the student's hearing loss was. So it could be a student with a mild hearing loss or a student who's profoundly deaf. They still showed gains. And again, if these students can do this, I think it is tremendously suggests that it will work for students who have access to the auditory pieces of our language. All right, so this young man, I'm going to show it to you, and you'll recognize, those of you who are itinerant in any way, shape, or form, that they are in some kind of storage closet, right? That we end up there at some point or another. So at this time, he was in 7th or 8th grade. And when he came to the States as a very young man, he had almost no language at all. English, not where he is from. I'm not going to say too much because this young man is from our state, and I just don't want to give too much away about his identity, but we have his permission to use his video. Now, you will hear there is a speech language pathologist who is working with him, and you will hear her helping him problem solve. But I want you to notice how much of the visual phonics is he being asked to produce, or how much is he producing? That's what I want you to notice in this.
Okay, read these words for me, please.
Hotel.
Hotel.
Hotel. Confuse. Escape. It them. Eyes
What's
them.
the other sound it says?
Eyes them.
Item.
Time.
Give me your T. Item.
Time.
Thank you.
Robot.
And I hear robot.
Robot.
Okay,
Begin.
good.
Replace.
I hear
Replace.
re.
Replace.
Nice job.
Inspire.
Clear I.
Inspire.
Very good.
Humid.
Very good.
Protect.
That was great.
Costume.
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 Good, you.
5-day pair.
What's the other sound? We have A or A. Which one is that going to say?
Vampire.
Very good. You found it by yourself.
So, I'm going to ask you, was he being asked to use the gestures for everything? No, absolutely not. Only for corrective or miscue corrections for him. And I don't think she ever used the written symbols with him. he didn't, sometimes students have enough trouble getting to the English print. She did not introduce it to him because he was struggling enough with the English print. We don't introduce other print when the students are struggling with our first language print. Or maybe it's their second or third language, right?
Okay, read these words for me.
Even though I love him, we're not gonna see him again. So I'm gonna just move to the charts with this. So a couple years ago, Dr. Lena Edwards Santoro, many of you will know that name in literacy and special education. We had her work with us to get some data results from here in Pennsylvania. And so under the phonological segmentation, and this was Dibbles used for this, you can see that many of these students that were involved in this study started out at intensive, and look at that growth. I mean, you can't, it is unbelievable, especially whoever this little purple line student was. And it's phenomenal. Now, and I will be clear, this is end of kindergarten instructional level, not necessarily chronological age. Because there are students on here who were in an MDS classroom who they're in this mix made those kinds of gains, which is phenomenal. And then looking at phonological segmentation, it was a smaller set of students with this, but at the end of kindergarten benchmarks, again, look at this, again, the blue one here. It's just, I get goosebumps every time I look at this. You know, the red is the trend or trend line. And it's just, I mean, the data speaks for itself that they were able to do this. And again, some of these kids, they were all deaf or hard of hearing with that group. So in summary, visual phonics helps to make the connection to speech sounds. For example, O-U-G-H, do, tough, through, has a different sound in each word. And then, you know what, it's fun. And it is easy to implement because you don't have to go look for a program. You're going to use the ones you're already using. Okay. And it's a tool for making sounds visible and linking to print. And it is not, remember, a communication system, a literacy program, a language, or a system for writing. It isn't. So I know I'm going to do a time check here.
I have 118, Sue Ann.
Okay. So, all right, and we have until 1:45?
Yes.
Perfect, perfect. So just a little reminder, you know, let's look at the long and short vowels, right? A, E, I, O, U. Abstract vowels, which are the diphthongs and more. As in book, oo as in spoon. And then there are controlled and vocalic R, air, ire as in inspire. We heard our young man using that. And, you know, there's the consonants that we have. We have affricates, those that have friction, digraphs, two letters that end up making one sound, nasals, n, the sounds for the letters M and N. And, you know, there's so many ways to spell those. And that's not where I wanted to go. On this one, I just want to stress that the final bullet on here is you don't gesture what the student doesn't need. You know, all this language above it is really helpful for you to talk to people about visual phonics, why it's good for us to use instruction to identify omitted sounds, you know, working with reading, spelling, and sound out words. How many times are you asked as a teacher, how do you spell? Yeah, now I can just give you the visual phonics for it and you spell it. You know, but you don't use what the child doesn't need. That's wasted time and energy. You only use what they need. And sometimes we get the questions around, you know, sign language, finger spelling, that's the alphabet. And then cued speech, people say, I've heard of cued speech. Is that the same? No, that is sound by syllables, and it has its own set of gestures. And it's not typically dealing with individual phonemes. It's sound by syllables, they blend together. And then, but visual phonics is just looking at those phonemes, individual phonemes. So when we're talking about the written symbols, I wanted to make sure we address that today. They are only used after students have learned and links to the gestures or the sounds. And again, you may never use them at all. And it can be used with students for later support. We're going to see a teacher using it in a minute with a middle school student. And it helps you remember it better. So the word nest, nest. So there we have the 4 phonemes in nest in visual phonics. And you can see how different that is. So maybe the student isn't getting the s in there. You could add that symbol for s, like like the speech teacher said, I hear this, it should be this. And she was able to give him the gesture for that one sound that the student might need. All right, so with this, we're going to show you a couple things of teachers implementing. You're going to see a teacher using an Osmo. A lot of times speech folks know what that is, but other folks don't. It's a nifty device you use with an iPad, and you can create lessons and it interacts with the iPad. You hook it on the top of the iPad and you'll see it in action. It's very cool. And you're also going to see the image that you see representing the video is they're working with syllable types for middle school. So, and I apologize, I'm going to click on play and then move fast forward a little bit through to where I want to go.
We're gonna roll it. Yep, has the same over there, right?
Sorry.
What is that?
Which?
Which. What's the first sound you hear in the word
W.
which? W. Listen, it's not wha it's wha it.
It.
What's our next sound? We have 3 sounds. Wha it ch.
T. C.
TCH. Great listening, Brandon. You can't find it. It's upside down. Good job. Ooh, do you
So you saw that in action, and here you're going to see her with the same student using using a whiteboard
good paying attention?
just to reinforce. Again, she's working on the sounds and letters that he needs to work on, and only using visual phonics when he needs it. And that Osmo thing was pretty cool, huh? Sometimes Target has it on sale. She had Page and Cage on it. I want to take us to our, oh, here he is. And here's our middle schooler.
Separate the syllables. Write down what the vowel sound is.
So what, as you can see, he's swooping by syllables, And he's using the Visual Phonics font print above the vowel sounds because he was struggling with vowel sounds desperately. So she is having him label those because that's where he's struggling. A lot of our students fell apart with the vowel sounds because they're so tricky. But I am going to move forward. So you got some ideas there. I know there's been quite a few requests for how can we get training in visual phonics. There is information a little bit later at the end, which is in a few minutes, but at the end of the PowerPoint that will talk about how to get training in visual phonics. So let's do a couple more symbols and gestures. And we actually already did this when we were talking about how it's formed, the g and the t. So remember that when you go t, it's your tongue exploding off your teeth. And if you look at your hand, you see the thumb is the line to the left, your index finger is the line to the right, and your middle finger is that little hump in between. And it actually looks like that symbol. Now this is the voiced TH or v, and it tickles your tongue. So to produce this one, you make that symbol. Now do you see how my hand, all my fingers are together? They're one piece. If yours don't want to stay there, that's okay, but do your best. And all you're going to do is slide your finger down your thumb and make the sound. It's and it's just once. I'm sure I would be complimenting all of you. And then finally, the short I sound, I. And with that, it is your little finger sticks up in the air, but you drop it over. I. And it moves forward just slightly. I. And it's a skinny line, just like the written symbol is there, a skinny line. I. So have any of you already gone back and looked at your quiz? Because the ones we covered are the ones that were in your pretest. Can somebody put in the chat what the answer is? Maybe you already are.
Brittany got it.
Yep.
A couple other people, there it is.
Yep, this is it. So I know I'm not expecting you to be able to do it this fast, but if you want to, let's sound it out, class. We're going to do v, I, s. Next word, I, z. It's spelled with an S, but sounds like a Z, right? It. This is it. Let me look at my time again. We have time. All right, so some of the teachers that we just saw in the examples shared a little wisdom on how they began implementing this. Because you think you have to do some grandiose introduction, but not so much. There's a woman that is a sign language interpreter, and she was interpreting in the classroom, and she said to the student, you know what, today I'm going to show you some of the sounds. The letters, we have those, but I'm going to show you the sounds. That was it. And she began to sprinkle them in. And then soon the student was saying to her, show me the sounds, and pointing to a word. You know, when they can advocate for themselves, that's huge. Just got goosebumps, a little bit of a nerd there. But all right, so let's hear from a few folks on how they began to implement this.
The first thing I did was I used the sounds that the student had the most difficulty discriminating against, which for my particular student was the K in G sounds. So when he was reading, we started with those sounds. So as he would read, he would use the visual phonics prompts in order to let me know that he knew the difference between these two sounds. Then we slowly progressed and started using the curriculum that the school uses. They use a phonics program, so as they would introduce a new sound, I would introduce that sound with the visual phonics. The one thing that I added for this particular student was the same sounds with different spellings. I felt like he was able to understand those differences, so we did that for him, but I understand for some of my other students that I don't use visual phonics for, that wasn't quite appropriate at the time that we were starting.
Typically I just start while using the regular ed curriculum, depending on what grade level I'm teaching and how the letters are introduced there. That's how I introduce it. Whatever letters they're working on that week, I will introduce the visual hand prompt and symbol at the same time. So I just use it in conjunction with the regular ed curriculum.
Great. All right. Have you things did you do?
I think it was pretty overwhelming in the beginning because I just kind of felt like it was an additional thing I was trying to think about. When I kind of just realized, like, I'm just going to teach reading, and then when I need to use this, then I'm going to use it. That made things a lot more smooth. So when, like I told you, I'm using the Wilson Reading Program, they do a section on, we're just going over sounds. That's like a perfect time to say, like, this. And then I don't even really have to teach them this as a separate thing, and they know it's a separate thing, but they kind of, it just gets integrated with reading, and we're at a point now where I can just use it when we need to, especially like his speech is very clear, so he doesn't need to like prompt that back to me, but sometimes he does if he's choosing to be a little bit lazier with his voice, or if it's a sound that he doesn't know how to say. So I can ask it from him, and then he'll have to think, and then he can show it to me. So.
All right. So, as they said, they are just using it with whatever is being used in the classroom. So very important. For speech folks on here, it pairs beautifully with the International Phonetic Alphabet, with IPA. We actually had our state lead on speech, Elizabeth Christopher. She created, if when you come to a training, we have a document that has the IPA with all the spelling options, some words, and the visual phonics. So she created a beautiful document for us. And as an aside, the woman on the right in the picture was with that young man in the steamer trunk room, back room, doing visual phonics in the other video. So we're coming into the home stretch here. So spelling test and see the sound visual phonics. Can you do it? Well, you're testing, not teaching, but yes, one of our colleagues, Ann Hughes, she's from Virginia and a visual phonics trainer. She said the best way to do it would be, present the word just like we do in a regular spelling test. You can use the visual phonics with the gestures. You put it in a sentence, you say the word again with the gestures, and then the student writes the word. So that's a no-brainer. And we've gone to bat with districts to say why we need to be able to do that. So now, do you need a slide with a piece of pie on it for your student? No, not necessarily, but she did a nice job of creating some examples for us. So so I'm going to just be in the role of teacher. Class, our first word is pie. Everyone, Mom made an apple pie. Pie. Where did we give a P, an I, and an E? We didn't. We gave the phonemes. The students who have access to the auditory information are hearing pie, I, if they can segment it. So our students get to see pie. You can't give them. That's not leveling the playing field. That's cheating. And remember, you would only have to know the sounds you need for your lessons. So some resources. A lot of you may be familiar with these anyway. 50 nifty activities. Where is my, there it is. For teaching reading and spelling. Wiley Blevins, which great name, right? He has phonics A to Z for early K1 and then K1 and 2, I think, then 3 on up. So he has 2 levels from phonics A to Z. Great book to reinforce if your student needs more lessons that you can't pull out of your sleeve. FCRR, most folks know about Florida Center for Reading Research now, but go there and there is a lesson for every grade level on all the basic skills that you need for literacy. Phoneme Grapheme Mapping by Catherine Grace, awesome. So these are just some little, like if you have a few bucks to spend, maybe you can, purchase some of these. And then we have our friend Mary Dahlgren, toolsforreading.com is her website. And I didn't bring my copy of it, but she has some great resources for sound walls and for seeing the production. Here is an example of her cards on somebody's sound wall, organized in order of production from high and tight, long E, down to ah, and then up to the other vowels. And then there's the digraphs and diphthongs on there. And our consonants. So they're organized by production, stop sounds, nasals. The cards are great and they come in a few different sizes. So that's good. And here is the gentleman we were talking about, Dave Krupke. He, on his website, he has a tab that says visual phonics. And when you go into that, it is chock full of resources, how to explain it to a family. Won't students get confused if you're using some other form of, gesture system, that kind of thing. So, and finally, opportunities for training. Like I said, I would be getting to that. So first of all, there's never a fee for training that Patton does unless there's materials involved. So it's free. The initial training, that means that is 8 hours. It has to be at least 8 hours, I have to say. But often we push it a little longer. If we're all getting together, we might as well really make it worthwhile. So we have been providing it virtually, and now we are doing it face-to-face again. And we prefer that it's 2 consecutive days. And there are materials that they would like us to have everybody get. And one of them is their sound cards, and it's a download. So you download it, and on the back, it has an explanation of the sound, how it's produced, some words, and a drawing of someone making that sound. We have family-specific trainings. So if you have families that are wanting training in this, then you will contact Erin Campion, and her contact information is on the last slide. So because families don't need all the information that you do as educators necessarily. And then we do refresher training. And there is verification that you have been through a full training before you can participate in one of those. They have materials to support visual phonics. Again, the font is a download. The cards are a download, but then there are other resources like a strip that can go on the desk or a poster for the wall and a few other things that they do have materials for, but it can be layered right over whatever you're doing. So you won't need to necessarily purchase other resources. All right, so I just talked about Erin Campion. There is her contact email. My colleagues, Jennifer and Tara, are also on there in addition to myself.